You're listening to the Seen and Solved podcast brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. Better results, less chemistry.
Welcome back to this edition of Seen and Solved. We have Jeff Davis from Hubbard-Hall. Jeff's been a while since we talked to you about solvents, and I know it's been very busy in the industry, a lot of regulation updates and changes and things. And I know we just recently got a couple new announcements. So give us some insight on everything that you're hearing and seeing, and what is the latest that the industry can know about.
Well, thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate coming back. I think I initially planned kind of going through, which I will go through some of the updates that we've seen on all the different solvents, whether it be chlorinated, fluorinated, brominated, and where things stand currently. But I think what has happened most recently is a few weeks ago, we had the EPA administrator had announced that for trichlorethylene, or TCE, there was going to be a comment period in trying to curb the amount of usage and eliminate as best they could the use of trichlorethylene in consumer and industrial applications. Most recently, you and I both are aware that EPA had sent through, as a result of the Biden administration trying to eliminate the use of trichlorethylene in all applications without exception. Now, what they're saying is they would give people a year typically to change to something else or to just eliminate the use of the trichlorethylene. But there will be some industrial and commercial and federal applications, whether it be military or things like that, related to electric vehicles or whatever, that may have an extended period of time to make changes. So I think it's going to be something that there'll continue to be more and more pressure on some of these solvents. And trichlorethylene is just the one that is most current and the most recent updates and elimination, if you will, that we've seen in the last probably 2 or 3 years.
Right. Yeah, this is something that everybody pretty much expected we were going towards this, correct? I mean, and I know you all have been trying to sort of educate people on they're going to be losing some of these things that they're going to be had been used to, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop here. I know they identified maybe a couple, right? It's half dozen to 10 chemicals that they were really going to take a look at. So this was pretty much expected. Maybe more to come, do you think?
Yeah, the Toxic Substance Control Act had identified, in 2016, had identified 10 potentially hazardous chemicals. The ones of most note are the whole classification of chlorinated solvents being trichlorethylene, perchloroethylene, or PCE, and methylene chloride, or MEC. Those, along with n-Propyl bromide, or 1-bromopropane, which is a brominated solvent in the same family as the chlorinateds, are all under EPA's evaluation of what they call unreasonable risk to human health. That's typically been the purview of OSHA. And now we see that OSHA was always regulating worker safety over an 8-hour time-weighted average. And now we have EPA coming in saying these solvents are unreasonable risk to human health. So they've had proposed what they're calling ECHLs. ECHLs is the existing chemical exposure limits over 8 hours, and they're significantly reduced from where they had been from OSHA. Now, OSHA is the governing body, and they would take the lead from the ACGIH, the American Conference of Industrial Hygienists, for exposure levels. So historically, for instance, trichloroethylene's most recent threshold limit value for 8-hour exposure is 25 parts per million. The EPA's ECHL brings it down to 0.004 parts per million, almost unattainable. And I think what we're going to see is, and it's similar kind of classification for all 4 of those brominated or chlorinated solvents. So what we're seeing is probably the elimination, I would think, in the not too distant future of the use of these chemicals in open top degreasers, meaning there's a larger air solvent interface, even if they've got refrigeration or programmable hoists or automatic closures. Those are not emissionless or airless machines, so they are exposed to the environment. So that will be, I don't see how they're going to achieve any of those thresholds in any type of equipment, quite honestly, including the open tops.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned OSHA, EPA, a couple other groups, regulatory agencies, and it's, but they both move in different ways sometimes. But it does seem like EPA has accelerated this and has really, like you said, where they've allowed it, it's just something that's just uh, not really anything anybody can really utilize because such the low thresholds, right? I mean, this is something that it's basically a ban on it, essentially.
Well, it's not something that's new to any of us. I think it's, we've been preparing for the different changes of any solvents over the past 30 or 40 years. And the equipment has been considerably improved in the last 20 years. That being said, there are alternatives to some of these solvents. And we're always urging our customers to constantly be on the lookout and to test and to trial different solvents that you potentially can drop into a machine, or you may have to retrofit, or you may just need to purchase new emissionless degreasers where there is very, very limited exposure on some of those solvents.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, Hubbard-Hall's been doing a lot of trying to prepare the manufacturers and industries that this was coming, right? So it seems like it's getting closer and closer every month that we kind of get through to it. What are some things that you would advise manufacturers and shops to do if they're facing this? Certainly, if they haven't already started looking at alternatives, what can they start doing?
Tim, it's interesting because the first thing I'd recommend is for people not to put their head in the sand. It's not going to go away. So let's address it head on. And we've been providing some assistance for customers for a number of years. And most recently, we recommend that they have a cleaning audit, if you will, or a degreasing audit. Let's see, do you need that solvent you're currently using? Are there alternatives? And I would say 90% of the time there are suitable alternatives. There's trade-offs, however, right? There's trade-offs potentially on cleanliness, there are trade-offs on the process time, and obviously there's economic trade-offs. There's the value of some of the new solvents, the designer solvents, if you will, that are basically blends of fluorocarbons with some other chlorinated solvents, work extremely well in certain machinery with certain substrates and certain soils. I mean, there's always those caveats to don't go it alone, is what I would say. Don't ignore the fact that it's not going to come knocking at your door soon, and we'd be more than ready, willing, and able to try to help our customers get to that next step, whether it's equipment or if it's solvents or even water-based cleaning that we currently recommend to a lot of our customers, trying to find some alternative to providing that industrial and suitable cleaning alternative.
Right. Yeah, because I'm assuming, in this time, I know you've all been very busy working with folks, other manufacturers and such. And so you've probably looked and seen, what the substrates are, what the contaminants are, and you've pretty much have worked around, like you said, a solution that would work for a lot of people. So it might be something that could be really almost turnkey that you all have already dealt with before, right? Something that they should, if they're going to call you up and say, I've got this substrate, this is the contaminations, you've probably already seen that, haven't you?
Well, we've seen a lot of that, Tim, and I think obviously there's more exotic soils potentially, or there's a lot more demands on cleanliness if you're looking at some very precision cleaning applications, whether it be medical or military or aviation or aerospace. There's always going to be some challenge, but I think what tends to slow people down has been the availability of new equipment. I mean, it's going to be hard to replace those thousands of degreasers out in the field right now quickly. And I think it's going to be the cost of some of the alternatives. I mean, so that obviously will slow people down, that I don't want to put a new solvent in an old machine if it's not going to be as efficient. So that, that is kind of part of, one of the metrics we're trying to measure for customers is, can we clean it? Can we make sure it's sustainable? And you can continue. The beautiful thing about solvents, I would think, is they're infinitely recyclable, meaning you don't have to introduce water. And I think it's something that, as long as you're maintaining the solvents with stabilizers and testing the equipment all the time, you can use that relatively for years without having to replace the solvent.
So, Jeff, I was talking to a shop a few months ago, and one of the things he was telling me about, we were talking about some of the equipment. He was doing some upgrade, small and refurbishing. And he said, his most effective piece of equipment is a pen and paper, where he can sit down and jot down really what he'd like to do. What are some costs? Figuring out what things are costing him and where he could either save money or save additional money by spending some money because he knows that he'll get a return on investment with that. Is that what you see in a lot of the customers you're dealing with?
That's an excellent point. I think it's people always underestimate what they're going to need. And I think what we're seeing is, we've been trying for a number of years to try to promote the fact that you need to look at alternatives, right? But I think people if it's not broke, why fix it, right? But I think there's outside forces now that are demanding you look at alternative chemistry for whatever reason, whether it's solvents or you can't dispose of waste, whatever. But I look at it and think, when we go and talk to many customers, we provide maybe the eye-opening piece of bad news, if you will, right? We're trying to give them a reality that here are your alternatives, none of which may be attractive because they hadn't budgeted for it. Like you said, number one, it's going to cost a lot of money, but it could in fact help you in the long term because you're not going to use as much resources, or the machinery will last for decades. But I think the problem is, once we have broached that subject and put it on the line and told them the reality, they then go, and some customers will shut down because it's just too overwhelming. And then 3 years later, they want to go and revisit it. And like we said earlier, that just the time horizon, how long is it going to take for me to get the equipment in place? And how long is it going to be to modify my process? It becomes an overwhelming prospect. So I think you're right. Sitting down and trying to plan on pen and paper what your needs are today and what they're going to be in the future and I always recommend share that with your vendors, share that with them because they can help you kind of get to that point in time. You can make those investments.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great to have a solution that is long lasting and will solve all those problems with that. Well, great. Well, like I said, people can go to the Hubbard-Hall website. I know you've got a lot of case studies, you got a lot of data, a lot of information. They can certainly ring you all up. But, until the next time when EPA knocks out another product, again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you. Take care.
The Scene and South podcast is brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. For more podcasts, visit hubbardhall.com or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and join us on social media. Produced by Allcast.